Green Noise is back.
A podcast series about nature, biodiversity, conservation, and ecotourism from CapeNature.
We're shooting here, man.
The environment in which we work has changed drastically.
A lot of people would work very hard to meet Patrick Swayze on purpose. You did it by accident.
People cannot be separated with the environment.
Welcome to Green Noise, a podcast series about nature, biodiversity, conservation, and ecotourism from CapeNature. My name is Dan Corder, and as we always say on this show, now well into season 3, white noise is for putting people to sleep, but green noise is for helping people get more out of their waking lives. We've got another wonderful interview today. Well, 2 interviewees in a special episode about how biodiversity restoration secures our water future. And you may have noticed there's a subtly different vibe coming from me right now. It's because finally, after 2 full seasons, we managed to impress the right people at CapeNature, and we have the big boss who pays our bills, the CEO himself. Ashley Naidoo is on the show today. Ashley, thank you so much for joining. If this goes poorly, it's only a reflection on me, not the wonderful staff that you have here. Please, only get rid of me. They deserve their jobs.
I hear you, Dan, and thank you for having me. And I'm sorry I took 2 full episodes, but I first wanted to have some time to look at how those went with you.
Okay. Well, I'm glad so far I've just about made the cut. Joining Dr. Ashley Naidoo, the CEO of CapeNature, is a real legend, Louise Stafford, the country director of TNC Africa, bringing 28 years of experience in nature conservation and leads the Nature Conservancy's South Africa program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan, and excited to be here in nature and talking about our work and our partnership with CapeNature.
So for people who are unfamiliar, tell us please both about tell us about the Nature Conservancy, TNC.
Nature Conservancy is a global organization originated in the United States in 1952. So we work across the globe in over 70 countries, including Africa, where we work in 7 countries. South Africa is one of the newest country programs. We in fact started evolving into a full country program in 2024. So very young. We do work in freshwater or land, freshwater land and oceans, and work with local communities, and very focused on partnerships, because we know that without partners, we can't do the job.
And tell me a little bit about your kind of career working in conservation and in nature. Nearly 3 decades. It's extraordinary.
Well, I'm ex-CapeNature, so I started with the Working for Water program years ago. Then I spent a few years in CapeNature and moved to City of Cape Town, and then to the Nature Conservancy. And something that pulled me from government to the Nature Conservancy was my years in CapeNature, where we were trying to restore the catchments and biodiversity. And we had a struggle because the funding came from one source only, government. And when I learned about a concept of water funds, I thought, this can work in South Africa. So I joined the Nature Conservancy, and I'm really excited to come back to my old colleagues and see them all and say, here we are, we can work together, because I understand the challenges, the magnitude of the problem, and just excited to work with CapeNature because it's my people.
Exactly. I should mention for people who are listening but not watching that one of the wonderful things about this podcast is we do it on location at one of many phenomenal nature reserves and places that CapeNature manages and runs. And we are currently on the top of a mountain today in office for work at the Hottentots Holland Reserve, which is incredibly important and has catchment areas of water. As we were driving in on the R321 off of, I guess, over Solari's Pass and then took left onto the R321, you're seeing all of these kind of like collections of water on the road itself. And just by the way, Louise, because this is the one thing that I'm always fascinated by, like, how did you end up in conservation in the first place? Were you a ranger? Did you study science of some kind? Like, did you just really, really love being outdoors? Because I never know where people like you guys, how it happens.
I met somebody that's many years ago, when we didn't have cell phones that can take colored pictures.
Okay.
So we had to make, if you take a picture, you have to go to a copy shop and you make a copy of whatever you saw. And this big machine spit out this big copy and then off you go. And I met this person that worked for CapeNature at that stage, a Gaukama Nature Reserve manager. And I said, oh, beautiful pictures. What's that? He said, no. I said, are you scuba diving? He said, yes. And you? I said, no. He said, do you want to? I said, yes. And I met him through, and many other people from CapeNature. I thought, this is a cool job. I want to do it.
That's amazing.
The rest is, as they say, history.
That's amazing. So, Ashley, tell me a little bit about the connection between water security and biodiversity restoration.
So the message that we want to send out is that water doesn't come from a tap. Water originates in places like this, high up in the mountains. The rain falls, it comes down into streams, into rivers, and ultimately water serves biodiversity. But if you have your biodiversity right, you then get good water coming down the mountains. So water and biodiversity, it's part of the same system. Water is the fluid that allows the plants and animals to grow. They in turn clean the water, they collect the water for us. So in CapeNature, we want to have as pristine mountain catchment areas as we can, because that allows for most of the water to come down, and it allows for most of the water to come down in a good state where farmers can use it, households can use it, where kids and adults can play in rivers and streams and estuaries. We get the fish from it, the fish are happy, and even the formal and informal settlements. In South Africa, we have to admit that there are informal settlements, and it's so much healthier for people in and around informal settlements to use water that's running than water that's in a stagnant state.
Totally. It's funny. I love the idea on the program notes about natural infrastructure for water, particularly coming from Joburg, where if you hear the word infrastructure, you think about it being broken and praying that some other government official will care about the pothole on your street or whatever. Just having natural infrastructure. What an amazing idea. And of course, in the Cape, some of the best water quality to drink in the whole world, and particularly in South Africa. But what are some of the threats to the natural infrastructure of water that CapeNature is concerned about?
So the natural infrastructure, we like to convince our engineering friends to think about it in engineering terms as well. And it's not that engineering is simple, but what you put in is what you get out. So one of the threats is the large hectares that are in the Western Cape and elsewhere in South Africa and the world, where we have alien plants, large trees that pull out a lot of water, so that water doesn't get into the streams and doesn't get into the rivers. So the idea is get rid of the alien plants, more water comes down. It's I hate to use the word basic engineering, but the more you put in or the more you leave in, the more comes out at the other end. And then natural environments just allow for such better water quality to come down. All those toxins, all the bad things that you don't want. Plants and animals, plants especially, have a natural way of getting rid of that. They are wonderful, natural, nature's water treatment plants.
It's kind of amazing that we're blessed in the Cape with such good natural infrastructure. What else, Louise, is a threat to the natural infrastructure in the Cape beyond alien vegetation?
Habitat loss. You know, we have a tendency of changing the flow of rivers. That has a severe impact, because if you start fiddling with nature, it shows and it comes to bite you over time. The other thing is we're not conserving areas that's important in catchments specifically. For example, wetlands. And wetlands play that very important infiltration role. And if a wetland is damaged or and it can't fulfill its function, so it can't replenish groundwater and play its role. So we can look at nature as a system. So if something, and similar to our bodies, if you take nature and you say compare it to our bodies, if something is off, eventually the whole body will start feeling the pain. And the same is with nature. And nature has that we only see the effects later, so you don't have that immediate, okay, something's wrong. But by the time we see the impact, it's often sometimes too late, and sometimes it costs a lot of resources and time and effort to undo that. Ashley mentioned about the invasive trees in catchments. South Africa is a water scarce country. There's a prediction that the country will have a 17% water deficit in 2030. Studies have shown that we lose between 1.5 and 2.5 billion cubic meters of water every year as a result of invasive trees in our catchments. If we put that in a household context, it's water for 3 million households of an average of 4 people each.
Wow.
For agriculture, it's 120,000 hectares of irrigation for 1 year for crops. So, and if you think, if a country is facing a water deficit and we have that leak in our natural systems, it's quite a scary situation.
Absolutely. So the way I'm understanding it, and please help me, total amateur over here, don't know why they gave me this job, is so catchment areas are often very, very high up where rainfall happens on mountains or hilly areas or whatever, broadly not where people are living. And that's where the danger is from alien vegetation growing there. And then further downstream, quite literally, is where human intervention from communities changes waterways, dumping waste into waterways that means that it affects the water quality and makes it dangerous to drink. Is that kind of right in terms of the threat, the flow threat, Louise?
Yeah, and one cannot see, we've got to look at it as a system. So headwaters, alien trees, sometimes invasive trees, and further downstream is broken municipal infrastructure, dumping, treating rivers as sewers. So we have to, and even if you repair the upstream infrastructure, we've got to look at it as a system, because as Ashley said, water doesn't come from a tap. By the time it goes through such a long journey by the time it reaches the tap, and we have to make sure that entire system is healthy. So that means that we have to work together to make it happen. It's the private sector, it's municipalities, it's government, it's citizens. And if we change our relationship with the natural infrastructure and see it from a custodian perspective, and then we will treat it as if our lives depend on it, because it does.
Yeah. It's been really interesting to see in the last year this new trend around the world of mayors of cities trying to impress their citizens by cleaning up the very dirty rivers in those cities. The Seine in France, obviously, for the Olympics, the Chicago River recently in the city of Chicago. But I'm interested in how, in very, very high, like we're on this, I guess you would call it a plateau, but like the top of this set of mountains in the Hottentots Holland Nature Reserve. How does alien vegetation end up here? Is it like wind blowing seeds very, very high up generally, Ashley?
Yes, dispersal through winds, from plantations. People like having large trees that didn't originate in the Western Cape, but it gives us wonderful shade, and we understand that. There are also some commercial plantations, and for want of a better word, you have some escapees that get you, and it's a wonderful place. And once you get into an area, they can spread very, very quickly on that. So the higher up you go, the more difficult it is
to remove them.
To remove them. And working with partners like the TNC, we have specialized teams that can work with all the necessary safety equipment that they need. They're using very sharp instruments. They're using saws in small teams and steep angles. And between organizations like the TNC and CapeNature, we have the proper teams trained well to get to these high areas. So easier places are close to roads. We can get them quickly. And many people drive around and they look at the hills and say, why isn't CapeNature not taking those 6 pines off the top of the hill in my eye line? Well,
You go up there.
with a saw.
Exactly. So both of you have spoken about like systemic problems affecting a large system that takes rainfall or a natural spring all the way into somebody's home to be able to drink it. And you actually now have just mentioned about how difficult it is, but how necessary it is to deal with alien vegetation threatening headwaters, I think you described it, Louise. But tell me a little bit about how both TNC and CapeNature is looking at a broad system response to try and solve more than just say, I mean, I know you guys aren't in charge of fixing the municipal pipes, but like what other interventions are you working on or interested in developing beyond alien vegetation removal to try and restore and protect these systems better, Louise?
There's also erosion in some catchment. In the Western Cape, many of the catchment areas that we are working in is land owned by CapeNature. So that's the partnership. And then other areas like up in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, where people live in those catchments, there's often overgrazing, cattle grazing, and there, if you just change grazing practices, we work with other partners there, and if you change the grazing practices and let the field rest, it recovers naturally. And there we have people depend on the cattle is their livelihoods, and there's a Meat Naturally. It's an organization that work with communities that help them improve grazing practices and then bring meat to market. There's a really interesting and a very effective concept. So it's also about avoided costs. So if we can stop erosion from going into dams, the dams keep their capacity, and you avoid having to build more dams, because we tend to, if a dam loses capacity or if there's a problem, to build a new dam. And that's, if we can just look after the natural infrastructure, the natural flow of rivers, our wetlands, we don't have to build new dams every time we have a problem. So catchment areas are therefore very important to look after. And when people live in it, there's a different management approach, but it still leads to the end result of working with natural infrastructure, repairing that, and making sure that at least the water that goes downstream is clean, and then it's up to municipalities and the downstream users to become the caretakers of their resource.
For sure. This sounds like so much work and so many different moving parts and so many solutions required. Ashley, tell me about scaling, trying to fund all of this, the CEO of a biodiversity and conservation organization, but also how to create partnerships and human systems to be able to respond cohesively to all of these different kind of challenges and threats to something like a waterway, to make sure that everyone's working together effectively.
A few years ago, this concept of catchment to coast originated, and it became a theme, almost a buzzword, and this idea of there's a system from the mountains to your tap, and there's a role for different agencies in government and outside government. In government, we get some funding. Conservation, I won't say is at the bottom of the list, but we're in that list that has education and housing and welfare and social grants, and conservation is somewhere there. So we do rely on partners, the TNC being one of our really good examples of saying we want to think outside a financial year context and outside a 3-year planning cycle, which is the medium-term expenditure framework in government. Sorry, these are all technical terms in government, terms that I need to know, but not everyone else needs to know them. But with partnerships, we can think on 5, 10, and 30 years. We also can think about, you mentioned the role of municipalities. So our job with the TNCs, we're going to send as much water down in as best a condition down from the mountains. Then the pressure is on you is how do you use it in the best way for your agriculture sector, for your residential sector. Yes, people need it for cooking, for cleaning, and how do you then responsibly get it back into the system? We're not expecting perfect, but we're doing our jobs, giving you the best water quality, the most water coming down, and then there's pressure on you on that. Partnerships allowed us to think outside the planning cycles of government. And in nature, I regard something to be effective needs to be done for at least 30 years. And that's just my own opinion over the years. So it allows us a 10, 20, 30, 50-year time horizon because we're thinking with partners that are thinking on that same time scale and impact scale as that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tell me a little bit about the Greater Cape Town Water Fund. I've heard about that.
This is one that Louise is going to talk about. She's our main partner on that. But it's an example of something that came about with the water crisis in Cape Town. We are in a water-scarce country and a water-scarce province. And that directly speaks, and our important partner here is the City of Cape Town, TNC, City of Cape Town, CapeNature, everyone working together to return large volume, good quality water to the residents of the Western Cape, and in particular, the City of Cape Town. And it has all those components of high, steep mountain areas, specialized teams with specialized equipment, with the safety measures that are needed to be taken, working all the way down to make sure that water gets into the dam.
So I'll start off by saying what a water fund is.
Yes.
So the Nature Conservancy has been working for the past 25 years. First water fund was in Quito in Ecuador. And they actually came here 2 years ago to learn to see what we're doing. And it was such a privilege to see our oldest, most mature water fund globally to come and be here in Cape Town. So water funds are public-private partnerships. Nature Conservancy and partners have set up over 50 water funds now globally. And it is the concept of downstream users invest in upstream restoration.
I see.
And it uses a blended funding model. So it's funding from downstream users, corporates, private sector, government, big financial institutions, and it can range from, we are also, the innovative funding element is very pertinent. So how do we bring more, because how do we get other funding streams rather than just relying on certain ones? So the Greater Cape Town Water Fund was the first water fund in South Africa and the second in Africa. First one was the Apatana Nairobi Water Fund. And there are two others in South Africa now, the Kruger to Canyons up in the Blyde and Letaba catchments, water that goes to the Kruger National Park, and then the Otukela, where there's an interbasin transfer to Johannesburg. And the Greater Cape Town, all water funds are based on a business case. So we say, what is the problem? How do we prioritize it? It's long-term, as Ashley said, long-term projects, and then we do the implementation. So Cape Town, we started implementing in 2018, and the business case has shown that we're losing 55 billion liters of water every year in this region. And it's 2 months water supply for Cape Town. And to turn those water losses into gains, we need to clear 54,300 hectares
of alien vegetation.
Wow. In these mountains. So if you look at the mountains, you say, where are these aliens? They right behind it. It's mostly pines, and pines have a wind-blown seed. Looks like a little helicopter blade. And with the winds that we get here, it flies. And pine is specifically damaging because it can invade natural areas. Other want a bit of disturbance and they can invade, but pines doesn't matter. So we started working in 2018. We have a 30-year time frame, and we divided that into 2 phases. A high impact phase where we looked at how quickly can we turn the water losses into gains, and it's about 6 to 7 years. We have cleared 40,000 hectares so far. And we're now in those very, very high inaccessible areas because we follow a two-pronged approach. Tackle the light infestations before it becomes too dense, and it spreads on average, many factors taken into account, 17% per year. So if you leave one tree, over time you can make the sums. It gets more and denser and spread further. And we also went back and followed up about 47,000 hectares. So that's cumulative of those that we already cleared. We have trained 150 high-angle technicians, and those people are specialized. They access these steep, inaccessible areas with the abseil. We fly them in, drop them off in the mountain. They set up a base camp. We leave the base camp and move. We have created over 1,300 job opportunities, of which 50% are women. We work with 15 small businesses. So in addition to the biodiversity and water gains, there's also job opportunities in an area that needs the job opportunities, and then skills development. And so we are now looking, so the funding sources here in this case was initially anchored by private sector. Philanthropy did the science, then we had private sector partners who realized, make the connection. And we now, I mentioned that we now in that very dense area, we still not reached our target. So what do we do? So we're looking at innovative funding opportunities, working with private sector to see what can we do. So something that could potentially work and that we are thinking about and working on is a water bond. So if a water bond can work here, it can be scaled to other areas.
What is a water bond?
It is paying for outcomes.
Oh, I
so
see.
it's a very strict, what are we trying, what do we want to achieve,
Yes.
and pay for that. And that's why the business cases are so important, because it's exactly, what are we doing? And then if we get those initial high cost time at the period under control, the cost comes down while the benefits accrue. So the ecosystem recovers, it can function while we get the water that we need, and biodiversity returns. And the key is, how do we fund that long term? So we're working there with government. There's potential for potentially water tariffs. So this is where the public-private partnership element comes in. Work with private sector, public sector around a common objective to make that, to get that impact and restoration that we desperately need.
That is such a fascinating story. That's completely incredible. I have one question. Once you've cleared an area of alien vegetation, like in this case, pines, how much maintenance is required to go back to that hectare again in a year and say, okay, well, did any seeds bed in here? Are we finding the starting of anything? There must be check-in maintenance to prevent pines from just going back.
Yeah, we have to go back every year. And you have to do that multiple times, different factors, but that's why the program is 30 years. We cannot stop. Once we start, we cannot stop. If we stop,
they come back.
All that, and then that investment is, it was senseless.
I see.
So it's that's important. We need partners like CapeNature so that we can stay at it. And having this area managed by CapeNature, we know that it is in good hands beyond the lifespan of the
and of course, once you've got rid of the original very serious pines, it's a much easier job to go and pull out some saplings, right?
Yes.
And to make sure that they don't come back. That's fascinating. Ashley, what I'm also really interested in, which Louise touched on, is once you rip out the pines, natural vegetation grows back, local biodiversity is redeveloped, and that's not just plants, it's also animals. So that also are then reliant on proper water ecosystems that are being rejuvenated.
I was thinking, how am I going to introduce this? Our primary job at CapeNature is to get the ecology back. The plants that's supposed to be here should be here, and the animals that's supposed to be associated with the plants should be here. So our interest is in clearing alien invasive, example, the pine trees. It returns the water, but it also gets the ecology back to what the Western Cape ecology should be. As a manager in CapeNature, I'm supposed to say very important things about the Cape Floristic region. So it's a mega biodiverse area. Small animals and plants that don't occur anywhere else in the world. So we really really, really blessed to be in this part of the world, and clearing the alien trees gets us that. But it also has 2 or 3 or 4 other important things.
Yeah.
One, wildfires. Big trees are just fuel for fire. So if you're taking out big trees, you have more manageable fires when they occur. And the floristic region does require fire every now and then. Fire is not always a bad thing. This area of the world requires, these plant species do that. But it's much easier to manage and safer when you're not having huge logs of fuel added to that wildfire that's supposed to be there. It also then adds, because it's highly technical teams, small teams, as Louise mentioned, the opportunity for small businesses to partner with us is something we can do. And on the financing, the first 3 or 4 years are the hardest. Big trees, big logs have to be cut down. Then you go back the following year. Any saplings, you clean that. And the following year, any seeds you must. And then it gets easier. But the small businesses associated with this don't have that. I've been taught at CapeNature to say we don't clear alien invasives, we manage them.
I see.
Because the job doesn't end. You have to come back every year. It does get easier, but it's an ongoing job, which is not a bad thing because it sustains the small businesses associated with this activity.
Have you two both found that since day zero, it's been much easier to make people listen to you about water, particularly funders in government, or have they forgotten already how scary and hectic and intense that was?
It was easier, but memories are short.
Yeah. Also, COVID happened. We lost a lot of memory in COVID.
But what has happened in that with the CapeNature reserves, which are a little bit out of the small towns and the city of Cape Town, people have to spend a day driving there. We have noticed that after COVID, people want to get out. So we've had more than 500,000 people come out to places like this in the last year, which is a good thing. It gets the message across that water comes from here, not from the tap.
Totally. Louise, you've spoken about some really bold and interesting potential future innovations beyond the water fund. You mentioned water bond, water tariffs, and the rest. But you need a lot of government buy-in. You need a lot of private sector support. With the Nature Conservancy's network, with your extensive experience working at CapeNature and other places in this part of the world, are you optimistic for the future of water conservation and therefore life and humanity conservation in the Cape?
We have to be optimistic, but I am, because of what, if you have something that works and demonstrate it can happen at a scale that's needed, then others get interested. And I'm excited about this time in South Africa now. We've got a window here that we understand. We had day zero. As he rightly so said, short memories. But we gained momentum, and we are looking for more areas where water funds can work. More partners are coming on board, and government is we're excited about how government is coming on board. So I really think that if we look 3-4 years down the line, the impact and the scale that we will work at and more partnerships will start moving us closer to that tipping point where we can look for a more secure water future for South Africa.
Well, that was an absolute pleasure, and I've learned so much, and my head now hurts. And I'm going to go and process it all very, very slowly. Thank you so much to Louise. Thank you so much to Ashley. And thank you so much to you for watching and listening to this episode from Season 3 of the Green Noise podcast, live from literally the top of the mountain in a catchment area with some pine trees that are going to be dealt with. So help us very soon in Hottentot's Holland Nature Reserve. Thank you for watching.